Well, it's Wednesday, the day after Mardi Gras, the day when New Orleans supposedly goes back to normal after all the craziness. And for me, it's been that kind of day too, where I feel like I'm kind of coming back in to my real life after all the stuff that's been happening in my world here. And so I have a lot on my mind, but mostly kind of getting back to work and getting things done that I need to do and all of that. But one thing I wanted to just talk about briefly is that I had this experience where I met with a group of social workers this morning for a group supervision. And we had the most interesting discussion about the idea of change in a session with the client. So, for instance, an abrupt change, I should say. So, like, for instance, if a client comes in and is having a really terrible time one week and things are going really poorly, and then the next time they come in, like, say, 2 weeks later, their demeanor is completely different and life is good, and they say, oh, I've solved that problem with so and so, and everything's fine, and my life is wonderful. Um, we were talking about, like, how do you handle that kind of abrupt change when whatever that problem was is actually something really big that doesn't typically get quote unquote solved. I mean, we can argue whether problems are solved with people, but for the sake of discussion, they don't typically get solved or handled just that fast and that abruptly. So how do you, as a client, as a therapist, work with that client? Do you join them in this idea that everything's fine now, or do you explore a little bit and kind of say, well, let me challenge that a little and see what's going on? And in that discussion, I think I said something to the effect of, how do we know when something that's happened that's positive with a client is personal growth and positive change, or whether it's denial? Right? That old chestnut of a coping skill or coping mechanism of denial, which is real basic. How do we know whether that client's in denial, for instance, of the problem, or whether whatever it is they're saying represents actual personal growth and change? And we could pick that apart, and we did. We picked that apart in this session, but it got me thinking about the concept of denial. We use that word a lot just in our casual chat language. Oh, so and so's in denial, or such and such. But it's a really, I think it's both a really healthy coping skill and also can be unhealthy. I think denial is my coping skill of choice, even though I may not necessarily choose it. It's my go-to when I'm not consciously making a decision about something. So, for instance, I think that when there's a problem going on in my world that I don't really want to deal with, I am super good at not dealing with it. And, that might mean procrastinating, or it might mean actually just denying in my mind that that problem even exists. Just putting it right out of my mind. And that coping skill was probably generated when I was a child. Because I probably saw the grown-ups in my life using denial as a coping skill. It's a real common one for people with addiction and other issues, right? So, and number two, it was probably something that worked well for me as a kid to deal with the difficulties I was dealing with in my home life. So I probably learned denial pretty early on. And I've used it throughout my life in probably bad ways and helpful ways. So a bad way would be, the worst kind of way you can use denial is actually flat out not telling the truth, whether that's to yourself or to someone in your life. Or it is just simply not dealing with a problem, pretending it doesn't exist. Those are both certainly things that I have done in my life, and that I've had to kind of reconcile and reckon with. And denial can be good in some ways. So I have people ask me all the time, even as recently as yesterday, Mardi Gras, when I'm in costume and parading and having fun. I had someone ask me about my work, and they knew a little bit about the nature of my work. Like, for instance, asylum interviews, where I sit with someone for 3 or 4 hours and I hear all the details of the torture or the abuse that they experienced that led them to flee the country they fled to come here. And yes, that's really grueling work. Yes, I hear horrific stories of abuse and trauma. And the question is often posed to me, how do you hear those things and then, put on a smile for your kids at the end of the day, or be able to engage with people in a normal way and not be just completely destroyed by what you hear? And I think actually denial is in my back pocket. I am so good at denial and those bad ways that it's become probably the way that I handle hearing all these stories that are so horrible. I'm so good at compartmentalizing and denying things that it's also become a way that I cope with the work that I do. And it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about, because part of denial is also denying my own instincts and denying how I feel in my body, denying how I might interpret a certain situation. Denial is really insidious and also can be, like I said, in some ways, a positive thing. So it's just the thoughts in my mind are about what denial means in my life. And obviously, I think about it, what it means for my clients, what it means for the social workers I supervise and work with, what it means for my friends, what it means for society, right? We're so good at scrolling through our social media and seeing horrible things that are happening in our country and in our world and just keeping on moving. We are good at denial, good at compartmentalizing. So that's what I'm thinking about, and I think that's probably going to stick around in my thoughts for a while this week. I was walking to meet a friend for lunch today, and I was listening to a particular playlist that I have, which is, I actually have entitled it Music That Makes Me Happy. And I encourage anybody who might be watching this to start their own playlist of music that makes you happy. Because when you need to be happy, it's great to put on a playlist of music that tends to promote that feeling. Anyway, it's almost like a little bit of self-therapy. So I was listening to that playlist, and there's a song on that playlist called Oh Euphoria. And the name of the artist is the Kenton Cobblers Club. I know nothing about this band. For all I know, they're a one-hit wonder. It wound up in my Spotify sometime back, and I've heard it occasionally, and I really like it. It's an upbeat song, and it makes me happy. So one day I added it to that playlist. But it was occurring to me as I was thinking about denial as I was walking to this lunch engagement, and that song came on, and I thought, wow, as I hear this song and what they're singing about, it almost sounds like it's another form of denial. They're so euphoric because of the things happening in their life that they're not going to think about the other stuff. Anyway, that's my interpretation of it, so I just have to laugh and say that's what I'm going to add to my playlists. I also just realized that I forgot to add yesterday's song to the playlist, so I'll be adding both of those tonight. Anyway, and to that end, I think based on all of these thoughts that I'm having, I think the mind-body exercise I'm going to do tonight is another vocal mantra exercise that really is about feeling and identifying. We could talk about denial and come up with all kinds of exercises to get to that. But at its most basic level, I think that I have, unfortunately, in my life, learned very well how to deny how I feel about certain things. A lot of people do. They learn as women that we're not allowed to really get in touch with our feelings, or we're not allowed to talk about our feelings. Or if you're a survivor of, difficult childhoods or family of origin issues, you might learn to focus on everybody else's feelings and not your own, and deny your own. So I think the mind-body exercise I'm going to do tonight, just to follow on the concept of denial, is, and this is what I would recommend to anybody who might be watching this and thinking about that, is just like the other ones, I am simply going to do a 3 to 4 minute deep breathing exercise just to ground me and bring me into a place where I can be calm. And that would involve, again, just kind of closing my eyes, breathing deeply, And it would involve me actually, once I feel like I have relaxed myself a little bit and I've kind of come into my body, so to speak, or dropped into my body, use that language, I am just going to say, I think 5 times is good. I am going to say, I feel, and then fill in the blank. I feel blank. And I love open ended prompts like that, both for journaling and for kind of vocal mantras, because I do think they're helpful just to see what comes up. I love open ended questions like that. Some people get really frustrated with vague questions. I like them because I kind of like to see what's going to happen. So I am going to, before I go to bed tonight, I am going to sit and I'm going to breathe again for a few minutes just to get myself in a place where my core is relaxed. And then out loud, because I'm here by myself, I'm going to say, I feel. And that might be sleepy, or it might feel frustrated at such and such, or it might be scared about blank. And it doesn't even have to flow. It can be one word. If somebody is doing this and they're trying it, I can just say, I feel frightened. I feel lonely. Or I feel happy. I feel content. I feel curious. Whatever it might be, those are good practices to get in the habit of doing. Just identify your feelings. Emotion identification and management is a big part of what brings people into therapy. So I'm going to do that for myself tonight. And if I'm really feeling motivated after I do that, I'm going to sit with my journal and follow that up with some writing about how I feel. Just short, non going on and on and on, but just kind of whatever came up for me when I said it, I'm going to do a little writing in my journal about what came up for me. And that's where my thoughts are today.